A North Carolina man accused for strange and random acts of violence in the community is once again out on bond, but could his freedom be short-lived? Because police are investigating whether or not he had any involvement in the grisly murder of a Charlotte real estate agent. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. Last July, 32-year-old North Carolina real estate agent Whitney Hurd was found stabbed to death and wrapped in this blood-stained bedding in her South Park townhouse. Just a brutal crime. She was reportedly discovered by a private investigator that was hired by the family, and according to the Daily Mail, that PI called 911 and told 911 dispatch, "I'm helping the family look for a missing daughter. The body's here." Now, WSOC-TV has reported that law enforcement has looked into her dating history, Ring cameras, Whitney's laptop, her social media accounts, her cell phone, but no arrests. And there has essentially been silence about this case for 6 months, until now. Because outlets like the Daily Mail and WBTV3 are reporting a person of interest had been identified in connection with the killing at one point in time. Not clear if this is still a person of interest. We'll talk about this, but this is where things take a really interesting turn, because that person, according to these outlets, is 34-year-old Brandon Braxton, and this is per search warrants that the outlets got their hands on. So what is the connection here? Well, first you should know, this is a guy who has been in and out of trouble with the law. A conviction for unauthorized use of a motor vehicle, arrests for indecent exposure and injury to real property, and get this, he is facing charges of assault and larceny in connection with allegedly punching a man at a gas station, stealing a binder containing cash from a woman, and shattering windows. In fact, I'm going to read you some passages from affidavits in these cases. 1, the defendant walked into the victim's property and took a landscaping brick and threw the brick through upper level window on the right side. The defendant was heard yelling "Cougar" and "American Perfect" on video surveillance and walked away. How about this? On Sunday, October 27th, 2024, at approximately 1100 hours, officers responded to 301 North Poplar Street in reference to a nude male. Officers located a witness who stated that a nude male approached at the corner of 6th and Church Street. Officers located the male, who is later identified as Brandon Braxton. And then there's this. On December 31st, 2024, just a few weeks ago, the defendant was at the gas station and was at the same pump, but on the other side where he grabbed paper towels to blow his nose. The victim was at the gas pump and moved towards the trash can to throw out his paper towels, and the defendant made eye contact with him, then punched him, striking his upper lip. The defendant then ran off. Now, our research indicates that Brandon Braxton has posted bond, posted it yesterday. He was released. But here's the thing. With all of this going on, and this all happened after Whitney's death, per outlets like the Daily Mail and WTV3, police filed search warrants at Braxton's property weeks after Whitney's death, and they are quite illuminating, because WBTV3 states that a search warrant from July states that Braxton was, quote, identified as a person of interest through fingerprints collected and analyzed from the scene, and that during the search, quote, clothing, shoes, and a knife were found. And the search warrant also states Hurd's death is being investigated as a murder. Yeah, this is another story that we really want to stay on top of, so hopefully we can get a resolution soon. And to do that and keep producing these kinds of episodes, I gotta call out our incredible partner and sponsor, Upside. Now, Upside, if you don't know what it is a free app that gets you cash back when you buy daily essentials like gas, groceries, food. This is real cash back. It's money that appears in your Upside app that you transfer right into your bank accounts. So you look here, I used Upside to find a gas station near me. I claimed an offer on Upside. I pay with my credit card at the pump. I followed the steps on the app. I got cash back. It is super simple. You can use Upside at all different kinds of places, restaurants, convenience stores. So to find out how much you can earn, you click the link in the description to download Upside, or you scan the QR code on screen. But make sure to use our promo code SIDEBAR, because you get an extra 25 cents back on every gallon on your first tank of gas. There's another search warrant a few weeks later for swabs of Braxton's DNA for, quote, comparison and confirmation purposes. And the warrant indicated that, quote, based on these facts, there is probable cause that a murder has been committed and that the DNA of Brandon David Braxton is evidence of that murder. Now, all this time later, and let's be clear about this, he still hasn't been named as an official suspect in Whitney's killing, nor has he been arrested in connection with her death. But we're trying to understand what's going on here. So I want to bring in North Carolina trial attorney Jason St. Aubin to talk a little bit more about this. Jason, thanks so much for coming here on Sidebar. Appreciate it.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Jesse. I appreciate that.
So it's being reported that he was, I don't know, was a person of interest. But if these warrants were filed months ago and there's been no arrest, what do you think's going on here?
Well, murder suspects in North Carolina are investigated fairly thoroughly, especially in Mecklenburg County, where I practiced and have practiced criminal law for about 20 years now. I've represented dozens of folks charged with homicide in this county. And what I've known from that process is that they want to get it right the first time when they arrest somebody. And so, Charlotte, we have our own crime lab that allows us to actually analyze DNA on a local level. So it can still take months to do that. So if they took swabs from a suspect and want to compare them to material that's found at a crime scene, that process, even with our own lab, with the backup that they have, is going to take a few months, even if they rush it. Also, of note is the fact that we have programs in Charlotte that are designed to allow folks who are charged with minimal offenses outside of murder to be released. And one thing I just wanted to make sure I added for your story is that from my review of this case, it appears that Mr. Braxton was actually allowed to participate in the pretrial release program here in Charlotte, which is a program for people charged with low-level offenses like the ones that were holding him. One would have thought that if he was a prime suspect in a homicide and that had progressed to a certain degree, that the prosecutors would have definitely been emphatic about not having him released on that type of program back into the community. So that was an interesting thing that I uncovered.
Can you expand upon that in the sense that, look, if they have evidence to make an arrest, obviously they can hold him, right? But if they don't have quite enough evidence, and forgive me, does the evidence have to be presented to a grand jury first? I don't know what the process is in terms of in order to get charges back, but walk us through that. But if they're already maybe looking into him, is there any which way they can hold him for a period of time before he's ultimately charged?
Oh, that's a great question. So the way that the process works is that the police, the CMPD, Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department, will gather all the evidence they can. Right now, that DNA is being analyzed. It'll be compared via the lab to that buccal swab that was taken directly from Mr. Braxton. If there's any kind of match, then that's likely going to be what seals the deal in terms of them now bringing the police this evidence to the prosecutor. The prosecutor can actually press charges directly. So they don't need to go through the grand jury in order to first press charges against a suspect. Normally what happens in this local area is folks are arrested, taken to jail, but promptly the grand jury will meet within a week usually and move the case forward to a different stage. Folks who are charged with homicides in Charlotte rarely, if ever, get out. The folks that I've represented, it has been millions of dollars of bond, and it can be a situation where if he is charged with homicide, it's highly unlikely that he'll be able to be released.
Going back to the evidence here, do you think that there could be the alternative that maybe something is lacking in the fingerprints or the DNA? Maybe they have evidence, and again, purely speculation, that perhaps he was present, but they don't have enough to say that he's responsible for the crime, and they might be looking at corroborating evidence because, again, we're talking about 6 months, and these warrants, I know you say it takes quite an amount of time for this forensic data to come back, but at the same point, we are talking about a significant period of time, and I wonder if they might not have other evidence to suggest he was there.
And that's another really good point, because when you're looking at a murder scene, usually the best outcome and scenario for the law enforcement is that the suspect is on the scene or has recently fled the scene, not that it's uncovered quite a significant amount of time later, just like this scene was. And then it's a matter of what forensic evidence can be gathered and how it can be analyzed and where it's located, frankly. And I think that may play a role in what we're discussing here. Because if you think about where DNA might be found, there's places where it could be immediately obvious that that DNA could have only come from somebody who committed a homicide. Whereas sometimes there's DNA or fingerprint found on a windowsill where they're looking for more corroborating evidence to show that person may have been inside the home or that person may have interacted with the deceased. So you're right, there may be some evidence that DNA or fingerprints or anything was gathered, but they're looking for more to corroborate that it could have been involved with homicide.
And there's a lack of information coming from law enforcement. I mean, would you agree? Do you think it's unusual that 6 months, not a lot of answers? I'll give you an example, and I wanted your perspective on that as well. But, Whitney's car According to WTV3, police were looking for her BMW and they found it, but they never said where they found it. Why keep something like that secret? Why all the secrecy? Why not a lot of information coming out in the last few months?
Typically, when police handle homicide investigations, they tend to only leak information purposefully when they want to leak it. So it could have something to do with an approach that law enforcement's taking. But I think in a case like this, especially when you're dealing with a suspect who doesn't seem to be accused of crimes of passion or crimes of opportunity, frankly, going over his record, he's been accused of crimes of chaos. This is someone who, if that BMW was left by somebody like that, there should have been forensic evidence that could have been gathered from that vehicle. So we're not talking about the suspect that I've seen as being somebody who shows a lot of sophistication in what he's accused of. Some of the things that you listed earlier, for instance, if your viewers aren't familiar with the Charlotte area, where this man was found naked, it is literally like being on Fifth Avenue in New York. It is right in the heart of the center of the city. Skyscrapers are around this man. And this is 11 o'clock in the morning. He's completely naked. So these are the kind of things that are, to me, indicative of somebody who has some severe mental health issues. Having practiced and represented hundreds of people in our area accused of violent crimes that have mental illness, it's something that stood out to me immediately. And so going back to your initial question, the thought being, I don't know why they're holding some of these details back, given it's a high profile case, given that this person is likely, going to leave evidence behind. It couldn't be a very sophisticated type of situation if this is potentially their suspect. So it is kind of confusing. There may be a lot of reasons why they want to take their time and not have a lot of attention drawn while they're doing that.
And surveillance footage too, which I imagine they must have gotten a hold of, although again, we don't have clear answers. But by the way, I wanted to ask you this. We can't get confirmation if police actually interviewed Braxton about Whitney's death. Do you think he was?
Here's what I would say. First of all, to the point you just made, Charlotte actually has a network of cameras all around the city called real-time crime cameras. And they were just used in the most recent trial I just had in December. They can plot the course and direction of a vehicle, but the footage only goes back so far. So if they didn't find out that the car was stolen or the person was reported missing for some time, it may be difficult to track them. But with regards to your question about the interview, what I would say with regards to that particular issue is that even if they had interviewed somebody like this, given what I've read in the affidavits, I don't know if it may have generated enough information for them to make an arrest. The affidavits that you have read and quoted from, they, like you said, have him allegedly throwing a brick through somebody's window and yelling cougar. And there's another point in time for the offense he was convicted for where he had admitted to taking a car from an Amazon lot, and he previously worked at that business, and he took the car from the lot and returned it very carefully back to the lot. And when he was questioned about it, he said his name was Barack Obama. So this is somebody who is saying and doing things that the other person you talked about who he punched was a complete and total stranger, unknown to him, that just looked at him. So this is someone who, in my experience, if they're questioned by law enforcement, they may have disjointed memories, they may not make a lot of sense, and they may not provide a lot of information that is very useful to law enforcement, honestly.
And there's a caveat there also. These are allegations that he's facing. We'll see what happens with those charges. But I will tell you, if we think about alternative suspects, Jason, the reporting indicates that police were looking into her online dating history. And there was a warrant indicating that Whitney's mother said that her 32-year-old daughter was active on the app Hinge. When you look at that, is this more, you think, just another thing that they have to look into to dot every I, cross every T, or do you think something's there? Because I think you make a really good point about not saying it was a sophisticated crime, what happened to Whitney, but there was some evidence of trying to cover it up. And you make a really good point about what he's accused of. Is it consistent with what happened to her? I think that's a fair argument. So now if you're looking at alternative suspects, what do you think about the online dating history profiles?
I think that it is a wild world out there in terms of online dating. And I would say in terms of suspects that electronically, I deal with a lot of issues too, where law enforcement has unfettered access. They can get anything they need from these accounts. So if they subpoena Hinge, they can literally get every message that anyone has ever sent her, every account, all the emails attached to those accounts, everything they would need to investigate those folks. I'm sure they have vetted or looked through those dating profiles of the people she's contacted and made determinations. And they can make those determinations much quicker than, say, a crime lab can make about DNA. So one would think they would hopefully have gone through those suspects by now and made some decisions or interviewed some people about that. South Park is a very high-profile area of Charlotte. It contains some of the most wealthy people in town. So this is somebody who lived in a high-profile area, which is not known for homicides. And it's a place where this should be investigated thoroughly and quickly. And I think if law enforcement is grasping at straws a bit at this point, they may have some reasons to want to really strongly consider pressing forward with getting this forensic material analyzed to really conclusively answer this.
No, you're 100% right. And look, to be clear about this, I'm going to emphasize this one more time. Despite this reporting, Brandon Braxton has not been named a suspect. He has not been arrested in connection with Whitney's death. He has not been charged. But I tell you what is 100% clear. This is a tragic case. It is a young life that was taken so soon in a brutal manner. We're talking about a graduate of Providence High School, the University of South Carolina. She was loved by her family and sorority sisters, someone who has been described as generous, loving, and having an infectious smile and laugh. And hopefully her family and friends get answers sooner rather than later. Jason St. Aubin, thanks so much for coming on. Really appreciate it and great insight on this case.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here. Thanks again.
All right, everybody, that's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar. Thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Jesse Weber. I'll speak to you next time.